De laatste twee praatjes voor vandaag in deze zaal gaan over hardware, kleine systemen.
Rasberry.
Ja, en taart. Dus we beginnen met een verhaal over Raspberry Pi. En we hebben hier Gert van Loo. Hij is eigenlijk, ik denk, een van de vaders van de Raspberry Pi. En hij gaat ons vertellen hoe het zo gekomen is. In het echte leven, zou ik zeggen, in de tijd van de baas, doet hij ASIC design. En hij zei net tegen mij dat hij nog een baan zocht. Dus als jullie nog wel een goede ASIC designer die zijn sporen heeft verdiend in de open community nodig hebben, dan moet jij eventjes blijven tot de orde. Oké, ga je gang.
So I immediately start with a small confession that are there any English-speaking persons in the audience? Okay, because I'm going to hold this in English because I'm almost embarrassed to say so. After living in the UK for 17 years, my Dutch is getting rusty. So you probably know what the Raspberry Pi is. It's been quite a world phenomenon. What you might not have known is who I am. My name is Gert van Loo. I'm one of the fathers, one of the co-conspirators of generating the Raspberry Pi. I have what the Americans would call a master's degrees from the University in Delft in Informatica, software. So if any of you have important software questions, anything difficult, don't ask me because I've been doing hardware for the last 15 years. I can tell you about the Verilog language and things about that, but not about software. I have had the pleasure, really the pleasure, to be at the birth of the Raspberry Pi. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story. In fact, what happened is that it started off with me meeting Evan Upton, who's probably name well known for you if you're familiar with the Raspberry Pi, who I came past his desk and he showed me, look, I got Python working. I got Python working on the development system. And what I really want to now, I want to make a very tiny little computer system with a 2835, which has just the minimum, absolutely bare minimum on it. And that started, because without ever knowing it, is that having a big company like Broadcom has an advantage that you have access to almost anything. One thing I had access to was a CAD/CAM system. Without ever knowing it, I did my normal job from 7 till 4, and then from 4 till 6 for 2 weeks about in the evenings, I would take an existing Raspberry Pi design and cut it down. So we have this development system with everything, every bell and whistle you can think of, and cut it down, cut it down, cut it down. And after 2 weeks, I called Evan into a meeting room, so there's your design. He was quite astonished because he didn't expect that. That was the first part of it, and I'm going to show you some faces you've never seen before, because people have had a very important Raspberry Pi, although it's not very known. So we had the design, but then what? What are you going to do with it? So Evan wanted to have 15 prototypes, and let's see if we can get this working. That's when this guy came in. Completely unknown face to you, his name is Tim Ramsdale. He's head of the department in Cambridge. And he allowed us, he gave us permission to have 50 prototype boards made. And that was, if you look at the cost of that time, that's about, those time, 50 boards, very small volume, was about £200 each, so 50 times £200, and let you calculate what kind of money it is. It's a lot of money for each of you, but for Broadcom it's not big. Because that's the other advantage. If you have a big company like Broadcom, we make chips, but they also make prototypes, development systems. And in order to make those prototype development systems, they need to have PCB design, manufacturing. And so all I had to do was take the schematic, throw it over to I think in Taiwan is where the PCB department is, make me a PCB. And then they just do that. They come back to you, they confer with you, and then they check with you, and then you get a PCB back. And then the next thing you do, you say, listen, I got a sign-off from the boss for 50 of these prototypes. And so while the PCB is in development, you go to some guy who he doesn't do the production, he organizes production for you. So you just give him the list of bill of materials and say, I want to make 50 of these, and please can you make it so? And then you just sit back, and in a big company like that, after a while, the system comes back, you get a very big box on your desk with 50 prototypes in it. So if it was not for Tim Ramsdale, there would have been quite a lot of problems. This is one of the people which you don't see. So what we got back was that. And that was the Alpha board, the prototype which we worked on. You might have seen it. It has all bells and whistles on it, which we still have. We had buttons in there. We have things like the audio plug. It is the most expensive audio plug we've ever seen in a Raspberry Pi, because a big company doesn't, for prototyping, not in production, the only thing the library had was an audio plug with all kind of switches and everything else on it. So that was the story for the prototypes. Evan took the prototypes, he distributed it on people, the first software was brought off, things started working, and then he had to do the production. And of course you're quite familiar with this one. That's the production. But there was quite a lot before that came out. In fact, yes, this is the very first prototype, which still has the ID things on it. He had to have them made in China, and these guys really went out on a limb. They mortgaged their house, they put a lot of money in there, having 10,000 of these made. I mean, don't forget, at that time they didn't know they would sell 100,000 of them. One of the stories is, probably not many of you are familiar with manufacturing in China. Have you ever done manufacturing in China? I have by now. I've got my own products coming out there. It's a nightmare. Some stuff is very good, but one of the problems is that you cannot get components from outside China. If you do your manufacturing in China, every component has to come out of China. And if you then have 10,000 Raspberry Pi chips or 2835s, and they have to come out of China, you have a problem because they're outside. And getting them inside is a difficulty. This was one of the beautiful stories which a lot of people don't know. Jack Lang was on that thing. He says, oh, I got a solution for that. I know this little guy who's sitting in this big apartment flat in Hong Kong. We send the chips to him, and he takes those boxes on the back of his little moped, and he drives them over the border to the other side. So there you are, you've got all this money in there, you've got 10,000 chips, each about $5, $50,000, which you're going to send to an unknown address somewhere in Hong Kong, and hope the guy delivers them to the other side. That's the sort of risk these guys have been taking. That's the sort of things which a lot of people don't know about, but that's, yes, that was one of the consequences of doing business with China in an early stage. In fact, as you will know, it came through, the guy did deliver the chips. So, the story about, oh yes, big success, everybody's talking about it, the whole world is rattling, oh, we got a new computer. There were other things as consequences of that as well, because although this was instigated by Evan and Tim, nobody else in Broadcom knew about this. Not the higher layers. So you can imagine there's this Scott McGregor, or one of the other very high guys, sitting there in America, and then this reporter comes to them saying, what's this about this beautiful Raspberry Pi product you made? What? This sort of awareness is something they don't want to have. So there were some urgent questions going down the line for Tim and Evan. And in this case, it's a sort of good news. You know, there's a saying, don't ask for, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to get permission. In this case, it turned out good. Big advertisement, big names, but there were some awkward moments inside Broadcom organization before that happened. What has made this Raspberry Pi such a success? Many things. I think one of the advantages was that it came during a time there was a recession, so a cheap computer wasn't bad. Other things which is a great source of success, I still think, is the GPO connector. The fact that you could connect things to it. Now this shows again that success sometimes is just the draw of the luck. What happened is the original design, Evan and Pete didn't want to have the GPO connector on there. And I was on the design team and I fought for it, and one of the things I said, listen, I promised I would have at least 60 GPOs, so we have to have a GPO on there. And we had a little battle over the table there, and there was a compromise. What they would do, they would put the footprint down for the header, but they would not put the header on there, because it was too expensive. And then they got the quote from the manufacturer, says, yes, go ahead, come back. And when the first 10,000 came back, they found the header was on there, and they accidentally forgot to mention it as do not fit. And people have done the most amazing things. You can have lucky in a small thing. In the meantime, I'm doing some manufacturing in China myself, and I know that this sort of thing is quite amazing to see. That if I buy one of those connectors here over the counter, it costs sort of like €2.50. If you buy them in bulk, you can get them for €1. If you go to China, that connector costs about 3 euro cents. But then, of course, you have to have quite a volume of them. So that's the sort of thing. So that was so yes. So that's the sort of lucky things that's happened. Raspberry Pi. I'm going to go through this in several ways. Did all of you know that the Raspberry Pi was a charity? Some of the people know, quite a lot of people do not know that the Raspberry Pi organization is a charity. One of the consequences of that is that the board members are not allowed to have a salary, they're not allowed to have any money for that. No money can go into their pockets. I think that's another part which has very well helped the Raspberry Pi, because I don't know about you guys, but me, if I prefer to do work in the evenings and do quite a lot of extra time, then it's a very good idea that there's not some money which some CEO has made big money of it, get this big wad of cash and buys himself a Lamborghini for it. I think that's one of the things we see quite a lot from the community, that the Raspberry Pi people are willing to go the extra mile, to spend an extra time for this, because they know it's for charity, it's helping children and other people around there. And to show you that is, I think it also has also probably something to do with, I don't know, I read somewhere that engineers are the most honest people in the world. Not completely the most honest, but from category people, they're quite honest. I think it has something to do with our confrontation with limitation. I mean, cheating, lying, nowadays it's called spin, by the way, not cheat and lying, it's called spin. No matter how much we spin it, if we engineers build a bridge of 5 tons, and we sell it as 10 tons, for some reason it comes out and the first 10-ton truck drives over it. I think that sort of makes us quite honest, because we know that there are some things. But what is it? It's physics, Jim. That's the famous. So yeah, so that's accountable. So yes, specifically for this, I went down to the car park, and I think. Sorry, I'm a little ahead of myself. Raspberry Pi is a charity. If you come around and you find there's a Raspberry Pi trading around there, and you find out that's a limited company, this is the structure which the Raspberry Pi is built upon. So what you got the foundation, this is a charity, it hires engineers, spends the money, but there's also Raspberry Pi Trading. And that is a limited company which hires engineers and does a lot of money. And the reason for this is tax reasons. And we all know about taxes and tax people and how they come up with the most ridiculous laws, and you have to twist yourself to work around it. As the foundation, it is allowed to do commercial stuff, and it is allowed to earn money, but when you get above a certain threshold, you have to start paying tax over that money. Okay, so they shouldn't be earning any money. So what do you do then? You set up a trading company. The trading company is making the money. And if the trading company gets above a certain threshold, it has to pay tax over that. But now, if the trading company takes a huge amount of their cash and donates it to the Raspberry Pi Foundation, they can deduct that from tax. So in fact, you can avoid paying tax and still have the profit out of it. So yes, if you come across Raspberry Pi Trading, that's the reason you think about the making money. No, it's all about charity. Trading is a limited company, and it's completely 100% owned by the Raspberry Pi Foundation. And yes, coming back to did my story a little bit wrong. So coming back to the fact that it's an honest company, and the CEO does not buy a big expensive car for it, that's Eben Upton's car. It's a 10-year-old Volkswagen Polo. I think it's a Polo. He's not very good at things. Passat. So he's 10 years old, and it was quite funny because I put that picture up for you guys to show that the money does not go to expensive cars for the director. And I was planning to tell you that I know that's the same car which he sold the first Raspberry Pi out of 3 years ago, and then came across that picture on the internet and showed you it's exactly the same car which he's selling the things off. Yes. So Raspberry Pi is a charity organization, and its aim is to improve education for children, mostly with computers. What do they do for that? One of the things they do, they set up a Pi Academy. It's amazing how many teachers are scared even to go teaching computer science to the kids which know more about them than they do. And that's quite it's an incentive for not doing it. And you have the problem that you got this bright little kid in the car which continuously telling the teacher, no, that's wrong. And then the kids who do not know about it don't learn anything from it. So one of the things they do, they have these Pi Academies. This is where teachers can come in and get training for how to teach things with the Raspberry Pi. You don't have to be computer illiterate, but it helps. And they have had now, I want to say 4 of them, but now it's just 5 because there's just one finished yesterday in Wales. So it's free for the teachers. They get food and They get the food aid, they get the teaching is for free. What they have to pay themselves is the travel over there and the accommodation. You wouldn't believe how many teachers suddenly found they have relatives living near Cambridge. They not only do this in Pi Academy, they also go out. One of the guys in there told me that he recently went to Bernardo's out in London. Bernardo's is helping children. He was going to a special place where they have apprenticeships. These are children who have learning difficulty often concentrating things, so they go out there, they put the computer equipment there, and they have these children meet their first computers. And yes, there's always the more difficult part, but it's also quite satisfying that there are people who are very happy to pick that up and go with it. The other part is that a lot of people might not know is that they have an education fund. They got a £1 million education fund to give away. Applicable, you can apply for it, it's online, you find this on the Raspberry Pi website. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks to respond to a reply, and they give out the money in all kind of bundles. I've been hearing that they sell, you can put in a grant for $200, so £200, or they've even given out £100,000 amounts for all kind of education. And it's over the whole world. This is not for the UK, for anybody can apply for that. And this is another way in which they're helping out. I asked them also what they're going to do when the million is gone. They don't know that yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if more were coming in. I can't promise that, of course. As I said, I'm going from one subject to the other subject. Now, this is the subject you should all start listening very carefully about. A large part of the Raspberry Pi is used for XBMC. In fact, I spoke to somebody on this thing saying, "You actually use for XBMC, you use it from the video stuff." I had a quick look about OpenELAC downloads. These statistics, they're saying lies, damn lies, and statistics, of course. So we're coming out here sort of like 300,000, easily 300,000 downloads, which doesn't say 300,000 installations. Some people download once, install 3 times. Some people have problems installing and download it 3 times, install once. But there are an awful lot of installations about this out there. And I'm coming in here because I have this request for, I don't know if somebody knows it, this guy called Popcorn Mix. It's his online name. He's a colleague working at Raspberry Pi, and so he works his normal office hours, and every Monday from 6 till 10, every Wednesday from 6 till 10, another 4 hours extra at the end of the day, he tries to maintain and keep this XBMC and all the video stuff up and running. And he's getting a bit tired because he seems to be doing it all alone. So we've got a lot of people, open people here, open software, and so he said, frankly, don't come in with amateurs, come in with some professional people. I cannot teach it, but that's his logo. Mr. Popcorn Mix would appreciate it if you would get some help, because if you look at out there, there's probably 500,000 or more people all depending on his software. We're sending him swath of video every evening. He's sitting there watching all these videos. Yeah, so something went wrong, but if I run it, it doesn't show anything. So there's probably something wrong with it. Just to do it all alone. So he could use a little bit of help there. And so I said I will go into this meeting and then I'll ask for people to help you out, because yes, it's getting a little bit ridiculous. Battleship. Familiar with Battleship? Maybe if you do not know it, that game you know it in this form. Yes, it's Battleship. What I'm going to talk to you about is what the Raspberry Pi has been doing at the moment in other places. There's now 2 universities in England. Cambridge started with it, and University of York as well. What they do, every student which has finally signed up for computer science gets a Raspberry Pi. That's what they start off with. They also get the software, basic software with it. One of the advantages for the university is that everybody, they have a level playing field. Everybody has the same computer. So all the homework assignments, you know that everybody has the same computer, the same deployments, you know exactly what you're going to get into, which is an advantage. Other things, for example, is that nowadays comes with free Mathematica. I've never used it, I think it's a waste of space, but other people that completely swear about it, specifically the students and the people, so they're happy with that. What's also interesting to see is that in York, they've now, I think, don't know if in Cambridge, but definitely in York, I know, that they have now, on one of the introduction weeks, the students are asked to come up with any project what to do with the Raspberry Pi. All kind of weird projects. If you go on the internet, they come with the weirdest things, but somebody wanted to I think the latest thing is just holding playing cards in front of the camera and very quickly recognizing the playing card it is, things like that. And the other part of the course is, if the introduction week is to have the Battleship. contest. So every computer which they get has the Battleship program installed, and they can play computer against each other. But the only game set, the only moves they make is a random move, so random shooting. And it's up to the students then to come up with a better algorithm and write that. And then at the end of the day, we're going to play all these computers against each other. There's a little bit of luck, so it's 2 out of 3. And here you see some of that going on. So that's the Raspberry Pi playing Battleship. See the logos, etc., connected to another computer, so these students then have to write their own program. It's a very good introduction to computing. It's fun. It's voluntary. It's not obligatory. You can take a Raspberry Pi, keep it home all the time, but it's quite interesting to see that what it does for people, and it helps them getting to know each other and their capabilities. And beside the Raspberry Pi, you're probably also familiar with the fact that the Raspberry Pi brought out a 5 megapixel high HD camera, which is another thing which is changing the world. It's one of the things which they tried to do. They also brought out the Pi Noir, the infrared camera. This mostly because all cameras standard have an infrared filter, which makes it very difficult to use in low light or in darkness and other cases. There was a lot of questions from the community for having the infrared filter removed. And what a lot of people don't see is the effort it takes, Evan, to really go in there and fight for their cause. To have a major camera vendor change their product is not a trivial thing. He went in there and he fought a long battle for a long time with them to convince them that yes, there is a product, yes, there's enough volume, and we will take them and we'll sell them, and the Pi Noir will be a good product out there. And he managed to do that. And if you now go on the internet, you find all kind of beautiful pictures of people taking cameras of birds and coyotes and everything else out there, and it's just it's a thing. The other thing, of course, because the camera is now, with the Pi is getting so cheap, you get people doing things which wouldn't be possible before. The 48 camera 3D modeling. So you got all the lighting in there, there are 48 cameras in there, which all take a picture at the same time, then it gets processed, and then out of those 48 pictures at the same time makes a 3D model.
And you 3D print a new child.
If you So this is just the things which you wouldn't think be possible before. I mean, it's still, to be honest, it's not for the faint-hearted, because even with the low price of a $25 camera and a $25 board, it's $50 to have 50 cameras. It's still $2,500, and then all the other stuff, the network cables and everything else with it, it's still but who would have thought that you could do 50 cameras for a price like that? I mean, if you take a very high-res camera, you probably can buy 50 of these for that. So this is sort of, this was the chart, but a lot of people put objects on there, and then after they go indeed in the 3D printer, you go in there. So this is sort of useful stuff, but what you see there is the people who have fun, they start doing less useful stuff. This is the bullet camera. Bullet camera is the effect you see, which was first shown in, I think, The Matrix, where you have a project, a person sort of standing still, and while they're still, you make a whole 360-degree pictures all around them. So this is no longer useful, it's just fun, what you can do with it. So, yeah, so this is a setup where they have 48 cameras, and they're all connected up, take a picture at the same time, and then they can play it back. And this is another thing where you say, okay, what it shows is that this is the second step in getting cheap computing and doing things which we've never thought before. This is,
and if you know that originally they used to run the camera very quickly
around the subject.
On the track,
so yeah, now we can do things which at a price but previously this was only possible with film companies which have a sort of 5 million budget to do things, and nowadays, well, okay, it still costs you sort of like 3,000 euros or something, but you can do it in your back room, but they would never even think of. It's getting cheap hardware, things, etc. Which also gets me to what I see as the future a little bit, is that this was recently on the Raspberry Pi website. This was a person who was in volcanology, speleologue. If you go to the movie, you can see that this is a person who is investigating ducts of volcanoes, quite violent places, etc. And so she didn't have much big grant. She wanted to look in there. So what she did, she took a Raspberry Pi. What you see on there is a Raspberry Pi on wheels. And then at the front, the two sentences which is sort of like a Connect, which makes a 3D picture of the thing then. So and then they roll it out through the chasm, and then they make pictures, and they make a 3D picture of how these chasms look like. What I'm trying to show you is not this, it's an interesting thing, but what we see here is that the Raspberry Pi is a very cheap computer, and you have a very cheap camera. And the next what you see happening, coming out of, is very cheap robots. So where you previously would spend sort of like the cheapest robot would be something like $4,000 or $5,000, and there would be big things. Now you have small ones. But don't forget, there was a time when paper was very valuable. The Egyptians' paper was papyrus, was tremendously expensive. Nowadays we throw the newspaper out. And that's mostly because technology makes things cheaper. But this is another thing which you see happening, where previously you would not send a robot in there because you might not retrieve it, or you would be very, very careful getting it back and things like that. And that would be just too expensive. Now, okay, you lose $300. But what's $300 on a $30,000 subject for traveling and flight and everything else? So you can almost start throwing computers and robots at places where they would not be possible. And my feeling is that this sort of stuff will get more and more cheap and more possible until we really have to throw away robots where you don't care anymore. Okay, you just throw a robot in, and if it's lost, well, it's lost. Bad luck. And I think the Raspberry Pi is one of the things which makes that possible. One of the things the organisers suggested is some of my favourite subjects, some of the favourite things that we've done. This is one of the most simple ones, still one of my favourites. This is a Raspberry Pi with a single button. One button control. A guy who made this had a problem that his 92-year grandmother would like to read books, but she can't. So he has to have the audio books. And you got all these systems, we do audiobooks, but these audiobooks are still somebody who is cannot see very well, which otherwise you wouldn't go to audiobooks. And 92 years, complex technology, there was no simple solution on the market. So he made a one-button audio reader. So the audiobook is on the SD card. All you have to do is you press the button and it starts reading the book. You press the button again, it stops. You press the button and hold it for a long time, it goes back a chapter. That's the 3 actions, nothing else. And that's enough. That's something which somebody can understand. I can understand how to control this. I can now read my books. I get out of my loneliness. This is very important for people. The other system is very simple. If he wants to have a new book on there, he copies the book with a specific name on a USB stick. He plugs it in there. As soon as it sees the USB stick saying, oh, new book, it copies on the SD card, and that's done again. So this is one of the things which I think is a very good example of simple, elegant, but so important because it changes lives of people. Have anybody seen the Rhino project? So this is the Rhino project. What is happening is they take a Raspberry Pi and they plug some other stuff around it and they spread them around the countryside in Africa. And they are sensing. Their cameras, they got sound sensors, they got sensors on the camera. And what's happening is it detects motion with some intelligence behind it, and they try to catch rhino poachers. So they got one more complex system in the middle, so the central part, which then has more batteries, has more powerful computing, has an uplink to a satellite, and you got these small ones around it, which are camouflaged, and that's what they try to catch poachers with and see what's happening inside the African landscape. So this is another very great use of the Raspberry Pi, where you can do things with it which you hadn't thought before. Same thing again, cheap computer, cheap camera, lots of computing power, which can do things very, very useful. And as I've been asked to show some of my favorites, I'm going to come to, hopefully this next one works. Then there are the cases where you come across somebody's done with the Raspberry Pi, which you think, that's great. I have not done that myself. But somebody very far in the background, I've helped make this possible. And that's always quite great to see that. It's going to be quite interesting because at the moment I lost my capability. This is a video. I'm trying to get this to run. Bear with me because the screen has gone weird at the moment. So that's the original Ash shampoo advert. And that, to not make it too pessimistic, is a beautiful picture of somebody using the Raspberry Pi. And that's, after all those years, you think, I made that possible, I worked on that, and that gives you a good feeling. Thank you.
Any questions? Well, yeah.
Would you have done anything different in retrospect?
I don't think so. I think one of the lessons I learned out of this is the mantra we set out in the beginning, saying, if it can't be used by 98% of the people, don't put it on there. That was very useful. I think that was good. Something different? No, I think part of this project, while it was successful, is I think we hit the right sweet spot in many places. I think it was pretty darn close to perfect, which is not always possible, but I think that was, yes.
Other questions?
Can you tell us anything about the future of the Raspberry?
That's a question I often get. One of the things people often ask me is when will there be a new computer? And my answer is that in line with Evan and everything else, even if I knew that tomorrow a new computer would come out, I would still deny that today. It's called the Osborne effect. People here are not familiar with that, but that was a new case. That Osborne was a guy in front of the television. He came on television and said, "You think this is great? Wait for our next product." And the next product took longer to develop, and the whole company went bankrupt. So yes, the Raspberry Pi Foundation will keep working on it. They will keep improving the product in many ways as possible as they can. But I will always deny there's a new product coming out. So one of the problems, in fact, is that there's quite a lot of requests for people saying, can I still get the same computer if I put in my product in 5 to 10 years' time? And that's something which we try to guarantee, really, that the product will still be available in 5 to 10 years' time.
Other questions? Yeah.
Don't you have like problems with competition, like the banana pie that came out?
There's a lot of competition outside there. One of the things which is quite satisfying is that the community, yes, these people try to come into an area. As I said, the Raspberry Pi is a charitable organization that helps a lot. That means we get quite a lot more support from people to help us out than people trying to make a quick buck on the back of somebody else. I don't think, I'm not too worried about that. If you see the amount of effort and software still going into the Raspberry Pi, I mean, it's not generally known, but the whole Raspberry Pi team, Broadcom sacked 2,500 people. But Evan had managed to get the core of the most important people back into his organization again. There's a lot of development, a lot of software going into that. And on the other hand, the Raspberry Pi has always said, Evan has always said, the most important thing is to get cheap computers in the market for kids. So even if the Raspberry Pi organization would go bankrupt next month, they would still achieve a major goal. But that won't happen because we're still going very strong. And we're not afraid of the competition.
Other interesting questions? Okay, well, thanks again.